Okay, reading from the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Canto 10, Chapter 25, Text 7. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Cairāvataṁ nāgam. Āruhyānuvraje vrajam. Marud-gaṇair mahā-vegair nanda-goṣṭha-jighāṁsayā. I will follow you to Vraja, riding on my elephant, Airāvata, and taking me with me the swift and powerful wind gods to decimate the cowherd village of Nanda Mahārāja. Om-gaṇa-timirandasya gananjana shalakaya. Taksur unmalatam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sapadantikam Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, greetings from Sham Ashram. We had a really wonderful retreat. Cairāvataṁ Haritoshanani. Vidura, when he left on pilgrimage, he made that point. What is pilgrimage? Cairāvataṁ Haritoshanani. You make a vow only for Krishna. And that's the practice of Krishna consciousness. I mentioned in the Yoga Sutras, it mentions that there's 4 things of practice. Concentration over a prolonged period of time without any interruption, and in the right mood. And the right mood is very important, because without the right intention, there won't be the determination for doing something without interruption over a prolonged period of time. Over a prolonged period of time. So, so these retreats where you're absorbed, and I gave a simple analogy, and I've told it to you many times, but analogies are very powerful. They somehow, it's one of the pramanas, analogy. It's just a way of putting something in another context that allows you by association to understand something. So what I wanted to try to figure out is why, when there's concentration, there's fruition of devotion. Why does it take that kind of concentration? And I gave the analogy of a magnifying glass, and you put it through the sun on a piece of paper. It doesn't burn immediately. So sometimes it takes concentration to bring out the power of the result and the power of something. So it's really wonderful to see the transformation and how bhakti works. That's how the process of bhakti works. It's worship, and worship means, we discussed this in one of our classes, upasana. Asana, you sit, and an asana means someplace which is exclusive. And when you and when something's exclusive and you use it for the purpose for which it's exclusive of, again, it has that energy, and the sitting becomes upasana. You sit near God. We're not separated from God by a physical distance, because factually, advayam jnana, God is consciousness. There's nothing separate from God. It's only in our consciousness that we see things separate from God. So what is turning to God? It means to focus on God. And when that happens, it reverses the whole material process, because the whole material process is this turning from God. And turning from God just means you don't want God, and God fulfills that by an illusion. He fulfills your desire for control and enjoyment by allowing you to have some territorial conception. To have a territorial conception, you have to be an illusion, because everything is owned by God. That's why it's so powerful being in Prabhupada's room, because everything was so intensely in the service of Krishna. It was so intensely in the service of Krishna. So if you wanted to be the enjoyer and be in Prabhupada's room, you'd have to be in the illusion that it wasn't Prabhupada's room. If you in that kind of circumstance and wanted to satisfy your ego, then the only way to do that is to be in the illusion that it wasn't Prabhupada's room. So the only way to be the enjoyer and controller in this world is to be be in the illusion that it's not Krishna's. And that's called Maya. Maya means not this, not what it is. You have to be in the illusion, Maya. It's not what it is. It's something else. And what's something else? That it's not what it is, which is God. It's separate from God. And therefore, I can have the sense of enjoyment and control, which is not happiness. Happiness is not a mental conception. Happiness is an ontological reality of connecting with God and connecting with God's pleasure potency. And the pleasure potency is love of Godhead. So when you have that sense, you also have a connection with God's energy of pleasure. Anything else is just it's not real pleasure. It's like dying of hunger and doing something else for pleasure. It doesn't work because there's something actually missing there. Anyway, these retreats are wonderful. This has somehow or other has been my year of retreats. I mean, even in India, I usually do like Puri and Vrindavan. This time we have Puri with Vrindavan. We went Govardhan. Now we have we finished a retreat here in July. We'll have one in upstate New York that looks like it's going on. It'll be being sent out soon, and then probably Janmashtami and end of September, end of August, beginning of September. Not settled yet, but we'll probably have a retreat here again in Kali. I've been searching for a new subject. I did the Govardhan Leela, and it's Leela. And if it's Leela, you can just read it and relish it. But I tend to gravitate towards the stories which have more philosophical input. So I'm looking for something else. And on Sunday, I'm going to begin something else. I was inspired by Sundar Gopal's presentation, where he gave a summary of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. So I want to start the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam again. And I have a good strategy to present it, because my thing is not reading. It's explaining things. What we're going to do is every day, I have a very nice sadhana in the morning. I'm going to study the purports. And then whatever I complete, I'll summarize the next day. So on Sunday, Rati, you can put that down, the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam part 1, which is we're starting with the introduction. So let's see, we'll read through this Govardhan Leela, which is really a spectacular bhavik, if there's such a word, because all the devotees, they're taking shelter of Krishna, fully taking shelter of Krishna. And there's something when, in those type of culture, a young boy can't look at a young girl, and there's like separation, and so that creates the parakiya ras. Parakiya means, kiya means to do, para means with another. Marriage is swakiya. Swa means own. You do with your own. Parakiya, you do with another. And we understand in that kind of realm, that kind of risk involved increases the intensity of that relationship. And but there's certain pastimes where Krishna so universally saves. He kills a demon here, he kills a demon here, but there are certain pastimes where he saves the whole community of Vraja from disaster. And the two ones I can think of are the Kaliya Leela, where the Jamuna is poisoned and all the cowherd boys die momentarily. And it's threatening, the very livelihood of the residents of Vrindavan. And therefore, Krishna in front of all the residents of Vrindavan is near dead. And then as the hero, he escapes and he kills the demon. And even the gopis, who normally can't be looking at Krishna, and Krishna, who can't normally be looking at the gopis, they can have that exchange because he's the hero, and he's the hero of everyone. He's not playing the lover of the gopis, he's playing the hero of Vrindavan. And they all, and you can imagine from the ontological perspective, what is God's pleasure at that particular time? Because it's all the devotees pouring their heart out at once. The cows even the cows are on the bank of the Jamuna, and they're mooing in pain of Krishna, but at the same sense in love of Krishna. And the birds are just chirping in anxiety. And the cowherd boys are saying the mother is going to go in the water. The father is wanting to save Krishna. They all faint. There's so much emotion. But it's all Krishna, 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 Krishna from perspective of all relationships. So it has a special kind of flavor in Krishna Leela, as does Govardhan Leela. Because in Govardhan Leela also, it's a devastation of the whole Vraj, the whole Vrindavan. The whole Vrindavan is being threatened with destruction from a Adi Daivika. There's 3 types of distress: Adi Atmika, Adi Bhautika, Adi Daivika. Adi Atmika, distress from your own mind. Adi Bhautika, distress from others they cause you, and Adi Daivika, the distress from the demigods, the whole thing. So it's just like today. I mean, unfortunately, what the people in Ukraine, I'm talking political things, I don't get into this, but the suffering is there. People's places are being bombed. I lived in a kind of a charmed generation, and I'm conditioned to it because I was in a generation, and I'm 73 years old. I didn't live through really a a national tragedy. Well, maybe I did with Vietnam War, but we were the student deferments. Actually, I remember when they stopped the student deferments. I remember where I was, and it was a lottery with your birthday, and if you came up, you would be drafted. And I remember sitting in the lounge of Hinman College in State University of New York at Binghamton, and we're listening over the radio as they are calling the numbers. You can imagine someone the loser who got the number right at the beginning. I was about 135, heard it October 13th, so that kind of thing, I read this sociologist, Malcolm Gladwell. He has different interesting points that I use applied to preaching and my intellectual life. And it was one thing where he was describing, it was a relationship to a particular point of how when you're invested in a truth, there's no limit how you will resist the facts if your truth is wrong. It's a psychological phenomenon. It's unbelievable how powerful it is. They say in different cults that he was describing where, spaceship was something and it doesn't come and they're watching the people and okay, it doesn't affect them. They're so invested in that truth. So it's Krishna consciousness, we have Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra for that reason. We have checks on it. Because you become invested in the wrong person. You need to have a check. So we have Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. But you become just so resistant. But it was describing that there was this Brahma mission. They had a particular idea on how the war should proceed. And they would send these bombers to Germany specifically. It was a whole story, but they believed that they had this mechanism where they can determine the accuracy of the bomb. Otherwise, it used to be just destroy the whole place with billions of bombs, but it's a whole thing. And 25% of the people wouldn't come back. 25% of the planes were shot down, and you knew it when you were going. Just imagine living in those kind of circumstances, or bubonic plague, or all the other things, or World War II. World War I was even worse. So all these kind of tragedies. So here it's reflected, this happens to the residents of Vrindavan, because it's a universal destruction. It's the Sambhantaka clouds. But what's so interesting is why Krishna does that. And the interesting why Krishna does that is very interesting on that platform. The reason why Krishna does that, and the analogy is given, just like hunger makes food taste better, distress increases the degree of shelter in the ultimate ecstasy. And this is on a high platform. This is beyond duality. What we always try to do to confuse ourselves intellectually is we take that realm and we judge it by the laws of material nature, how it works in this law. As if anthropomorphic, that world is based on how we're perceiving things here. We create that world. Though this world is a reflection of that. And therefore, to take it down to this platform and judge it by these laws, you're going to lose something. But at the same sense, how the world works here, because it's a reflection of that, gives us a kind of lens how we can understand and perceive that. But from that platform, there is this distress. And the distress creates some flavor of shelter and an enhancement of love. So although it seems like, why is Krishna being so cruel? Because what I'm going to read now, and to finish this story by next week, I'm going to have to read through it a little bit, is the destruction and what the residents are feeling. You know, that wonderful devotee, Alexander Strain, who wrote those two beautiful, incredible dramas that he wrote. Best Krishna dramas I've ever seen. He was writing a third, and somehow he never got to it. People's lives take different directions. And he was going to write another drama. And because he was so creative, how he's going to do it, he wanted to write the Govardhan Leela from the perspective of the residents of Vrindavan. What was it from their perspective as their houses were being flooded? As there was no difference from the low ground and the high ground, as the water was filling up, and as the cows, they're just about to drown. What was their bob? What were they feeling? What did they feel when Krishna finally lifted up that hill, telling everybody to come take shelter inside? What were those emotions? And what were those emotions towards Krishna? He's not only a hero, but he's just so exquisite and so beautiful. He's the ultimate person of attractiveness to draw love and affection out of one's heart in every way. And we can't even quantify that. We can't quantify that in this world. We don't have we can't quantify it. We can't quantify what spiritual blue looks like. Although we know that material blue is a reflection of spiritual blue, but we can't quantify what spiritual blue looks like. So here we'll start to read what happens. He says, I will follow you to Vraja, riding on my elephant, Airāvata, and taking with me the swift and powerful wind gods to decimate the cowherd village of Nanda Mahārāja. Sukadeva Goswami said, on Indra's order, the clouds of universal destruction released untimely from their bonds went to the cowherd pastures of Nanda Mahārāja. So these are the untimely. This is at the end of the universe. They're waiting. That's what their job is. Now, untimely, they're released, which also shows you, even in devotees, and we see it in the devotee community, is, hey, Hare Krishna, when you have attachment to ego or things and it's frustrated, you can become demoniac. You can become bewildered. You can become hateful. You can become anything but a devotee. And even it happens to Indra. You know, when Krishna, he gave this seminar in Puri on passage meditation. So I wrote about it because I tried. It was very effective. So it just slowly. And I've written about it before in terms of how to read the Bhagavatam in a prayerful way. But I began to slowly, I just picked Trinata Pisanichena. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street, more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer and chanting it every morning. I'm pretty good. I was up, I did it in my bed. I was still laying there, so I got like 15 more minutes under the cover. And it was in Govardhan, so it was cold when you get out of bed. I don't have central heating there. So I was chanting slowly and really meditating on what all these things mean, a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. What does that mean? More talented than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige. And I just kept on chanting it, at least for 15 minutes every morning. And then even when I usually get bored, like if I have to straighten up my room, completely bored. So I was just in my mind. Every time I was just chanting this verse, incorporating it. And I saw how challenged I was. How many times our ego becomes affronted in a day. And how subtle and deep these things are. So it's there, and it's there on Indra. And he's really, because he even his guru came in once, he didn't stand up. Destroyed his whole life. Because you develop that. The more things that you have under your control, the more you develop the abhiman, the man, M, long A and small a, the pride, the conception, controller, enjoyer. You become attached, you begin to see things as yours. It has such a subtle, that's why it's sometimes described reducing the material fevers. It's like when you have a fever, there's a disease, you take the fever down. So the fever of material existence is the possessiveness you can have if you're not very, very careful. If you're not very, very careful to give charity and open your house to guests and do all the other things in the Vedic culture to kind of protect you from just being overwhelmed as a grihamedi of existing in envy of others because of my possessions, either that I have more of or I have less of. So it becomes so bewildering. So bewildering. So he gets bewildered. And he orders the clouds of universal destruction, and they begin to torment the inhabitants by powerfully pouring down torrents of rain upon them. And it's described that the clouds can cover an entire earth with a single vast ocean. Like I say, our tragedies are personal. He did this to me. He did that to me. That's our tragedies. Of course, there's cancer, there's disease people have individually, but the shared devastation. So we had a little COVID, a little bit, but mostly the mind. Propelled by the fearsome wind gods, the clouds blazed with lightning bolts and roared with thunder as they hurled down hailstones. And now these little simple villages, all of a sudden the ice is coming, the ocean is coming from the thing. As the clouds release torrents of rain as thick as massive columns, the earth was submerged in the flood, and high ground can no longer be distinguished from low. The cows and other animals shivering from excessive rain and wind, and the cowherd men and ladies pained by the cold, all approached Lord Govinda for shelter. Krishna, 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 hey. Krishna, 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 Rakshamam. Rama, Raghava, Rama, Raghava, Rama, Raghava. And that this is our life. Our life is completely a universal destruction. It's just the way we are. All our lives are this. It's for the same reason, so that we can. It's kind of like the cowboy movie or something where someone goes crazy and then one cowboy goes like slaps him. I needed that to wake up from the torturous situation we're in, that we've got used to, which is going to give us death and disease, old age and death for sure. It's going to give us old age and death for sure. And we're wallowing in it and getting used to it. We're getting used to a situation that will kill us. Is there any wonder that Krishna turns up the heat? To jump out? Right? If Krishna doesn't turn up the heat, we don't jump out. We just live in our illusions. I'm the enjoyer, I'm the controller. And I always remember what Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, in the illusion that in the future things will get better when they only get worse. I'm still thinking it's going to get better next year. And how to be marchas, sparchas, the konteya, sitoshna sukha dukkha, agama payano nityas tams titishas, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course of time. It's like the changing of the summer and winter seasons, and one should learn to tolerate them. We have to learn these lessons. It's not that tragedy doesn't come and everything is okay. No, if tragedy doesn't come, it will come. Just like we had the passing of Kadamba Canto, which was extraordinary. And I saw it, pretty peaceful, pretty fearless. But what does it take? And if you don't have that and you haven't practiced and you are attached, and what is it? I described, if I lose my cell phone, would freak out. Oh my God. The cell phone falls over like a cliff. You could risk your life to get it. And if you lost your cell phone, oh my God, all my numbers. And then we have this thing where we lose everything. We lose everything. If Krishna wants to turn up the heat, get serious now. Trust no future, however pleasant. Prabhupada said to us when he was leaving the world, he saw his young disciples, don't think this won't happen to you. But Krishna sometimes liberates a whole country. That's why my parents' generation was called the greatest generation. That's what they were known as, the greatest generation. Because they fought. You know, my father went to war, my uncles went to war. Willing to risk their lives for some ideals. Mine was the draft dodging generation. The me generation. And the other names, Gen X, millennials. It's got that character. The cowherd men and women addressed the Lord. Krishna, Krishna, Mahabhaga, Tvam na tam gokulam prabho, chatum adasi devam na, kupatad bhaktavatsala. The cowherd men and women addressed the Lord. Krishna, Krishna, O most fortunate one, please deliver the cows from the wrath of Indra. O Lord, you are so affectionate to your devotees. Please save all of us. Save us. With Bob. It's the way the world is. We don't call out to Krishna unless there's difficulty. Then we take shelter. And then we get some Bob. We get some feeling. Unless someone is really realized and can see the world through the eyes of Shastra, so they can actually see the reality of it. The pashyati, Dehapatya kalitradishu akusanyeshva satswati, Hesham pramata nidanam, pashyati na pashyati, Deha, body, patya, relative, kalitradishu akus. We have these soldiers that we think is going to protect us. Hesham pramata nidanam, but it's absolutely insane. It's an army that's never won. The army that of family and body is never protected anyone. Pashyati the pashyati. You see, but you don't see. You're seeing everything. You're seeing it. Everyone's died. Everyone's father's died. Father's father's grandfather. Yeah, my mother, recently passed away. What does that mean? It means I'm next. Satyaraja's mother died at 103. So you're holding up. Now he's next. Krishna is affectionate. You're affectionate to your devotees. You're affectionate. So you take shelter of Krishna. Seeing the inhabitants of his goat pool rendered practically unconscious by the onslaught of hail and blasting wind, the Supreme Lord Hari understood that this was the work of angry Indra. He saw the inhabitants practically unconscious from the hail and the blasting winds. I think we're all a generation of wimps. What would we do if we had to face real calamity? If we had to take up arms to defend our family, we have to put our life on the line. What would we do? The Acharyas give the analogy that a hungry person, the pain of hunger increases the happiness he feels when he finally eats excellent food. And thus, hunger can be said to enhance the pleasure of eating. Similarly, the residents of Vrindavan, although not experiencing ordinary material anxiety, felt a type of distress at the activities of Indra and thus intensified their meditation on Krishna. When the Lord finally acted, the result was wonderful. Sri Krishna said to himself, because we have stopped his sacrifice, Indra caused this unusually fierce, unseasonable rain together with terrible winds and hail. By mystic power, I will completely counteract this disturbance caused by Indra. Demigods like Indra are proud of their opulence, and out of foolishness, they falsely consider themselves the Lord of the universe. I will now destroy such ignorance. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, the pride to my ignorance. Anisya, moja, out of foolishness. Mani nam, they falsely consider themselves out of foolishness. The Loka Ishva, they consider themselves out of foolishness. The Isha, the controller, Lokishva, they consider themselves the controller of everything out of foolishness.
Okay, so the third line.
Anisha, I shall defeat Śrīmad, this madness, this pride of opulence and ignorance. Since the demigods are endowed with the mode of goodness, the false pride of considering oneself the Lord should certainly not affect them. When I break the false prestige of those bereft of goodness, my purpose is to bring them relief. It shouldn't affect them. When you're in goodness, you should have perception. You should not be reactive based on prestige and ego. This shouldn't happen. When it happens, I will crush their false prestige, bereft of goodness. Bereft of goodness. Pure goodness has no pride. But material goodness has pride because you become proud of being more peaceful than other people. The material taint of Narada Muni is that he was attached to goodness. He was in the Himalayas. It was so peaceful. It leads to impersonalism. You're attached. You want peace, and therefore you want to eradicate everything else. Peacefulness. Bhakti is not peacefulness. It's love. Love has drama. I must therefore protect the cowherd community by my transcendental potency. For I am their shelter, I am their master, and indeed they're my own family. Therefore, I've taken a vow to protect my devotees. So I think what I'm going to do is I'll probably, it kind of got juicy again today, this go over it on Leela. So, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, you could start if you have any reflection. Anybody could share any reflection or any question.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for class. Yeah, it got a little fire and brimstone today. I love that you keep thinking it's gonna get better, but it's not. I love that. And I love that what you said just at the end, that pure goodness has no pride. Everybody, pure goodness has no pride. I really love that point a lot, and we see that play out in the Leela. So I really, really appreciated the hardcore preaching today, and that line, pure goodness has no pride. Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay. Anybody? Gail, you have any questions? Is Gail there?
No, Gail's not there.
I'm sure she must have arrived back from her ecstasy in college. She really was in ecstasy the whole time. Okay, I'll just, yeah, go ahead, Brother.
Question.
Yeah.
At the beginning, you started the Leela, you were talking about how the inhabitants of Vraja were in distress and how they were really reaching out to Krishna. And then from there, you went into explaining how the spiritual world is, or how the material world is a reflection of the spiritual world, and we can't relate to that distress. Now we do experience distress in that we reach out to Krishna. So can you elaborate a little bit on the difference between what they were experiencing and what we would be experiencing here?
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was a good question. See, what I was trying to explain is that the spiritual world is beyond duality. So their distress, it's real distress, but it has a quality of ecstasy that our distress does not have. It can't be the same level of suffering in the spiritual world. So I'm trying to kind of explain that it's a different kind of category. An analogy was given by maybe Vishwanath Chakravarti. Somebody gave the analogy how one thing has the opposite effect. So their distress, how can their distress have the opposite effect of happiness? Our distress doesn't have the opposite effect of happiness. The relief from it has the happiness, but the distress itself is not happy. But in there, the distress is happiness. So the only is dry ice, which burns even though it's cold. So it's something that has one effect and simultaneously has an opposite effect. So that's what they're describing. It's distress, but it's happiness. It's transcendental ecstasy. I always just, and I try to make it just as to, because I'm a philosopher. So I try to figure out things. So I try to figure out, how do you explain that? And the point is a lot of things are just another dimension. Like, for example, God can't be subjected to time and space. Even Jai was discussing in his class, if there's free will, then how could God know the future? Well, don't limit God. God could do everything. He can't be limited. And therefore he can give free will and he can know what's happening at the same time. Because he's beyond time. What does it mean to be beyond time? God can't be subjected to time. But for us, that's impossible to conceive because time is absolute. So how can the future be understood? So it's just the fact of the matter, when you deal with God, then you throw off any conceptions of the limitations of the material energy. Thank you. That was a good question. Allah. Okay, we got 3 more minutes. Okay, I'll just tell you when I started my Monday morning greetings. And it's always a challenge every week. It comes out so simple, but it's always a challenge every week. And I'm discussing the point of rasa and tattva. Tattva means science, facts. And rasa means subjective experience. So rasa is more like, I'm discussing it in terms of the Shastra, that not everything has that objective view. And there's an interesting verse, if anyone can find it, I doubt you can. What happens is I've studied so much, and there's so many interesting things, but I never write things down, so they're lost, but I know they're there. There's an analysis in the Bhagavatam itself where it lists the lineage of the kings. And it describes that the dates may not be right. In the Bhagavatam, it says the dates may not be right. It's not that Krishna doesn't exist and Balaram doesn't exist and the kings don't exist. And it's an interesting fact. And the reason is because they're not concerned with history. They're concerned with liberation and bhakti. Why should they waste their time in historical analysis? How's that going to add to the? So there's a sense in Shastra that the reality of the Shastra is in relationship to the absolute truth, in terms of liberation, in terms of devotion. And that's how it's analyzed. Your husband's here now. So, hey, Jeff, great to see you. Okay, enjoy you. Good. Enjoy your enjoy your stay here in this little paradise.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It is.
Yes, weather's great.
The weather's always like this all year round.
All year round, yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to finish here, class. That's okay.
Okay. So,
great. Make sure he has some hot tea. Take care of your husband. Come on. Radha Priti, don't go transcendental here. Get do your duty. This is just an example of how Krishna's will is not always hearing the Bhagavatam. I'm telling you, what?
That hurts.
Well, it's the truth.
thank you.
Okay, Haribo. Okay. Anybody like to say hello?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hey.
Thank you very much for class.
Yeah, Haribo. Yeah, it's funny. There's one lady listening to the class, and her husband's not a devotee, so he's visiting here. So he comes, right? So I tell her that, the highest truth is not always listening to the Bhagavatam. Go take care of your husband. Okay, it's great to see you, and it's great to see you sitting there with your books.
Thank you. You mentioned the challenge of the Monday morning greetings, and for sure, that challenge is part of what brings out your best.
It is. It's the joy of it. It's the joy of kind of watching Krishna work. It's
maybe even higher than serving, listening to the husband is serving, listening to the wife. I think that's my experience. Thank you again.
I'm just making a practical point. He's here in the ashram. He's never been here before. Go take care of him. Okay. All right, well, great. Thanks for hearing the class. And I like how you're hearing the class now, because you never on Wednesday before. So now in this, and you're actually looking quite healthy. So it must be good. Okay, Haribo, thank you so much.
Thank you.
One day you have to come here with your wife. It's
love
beautiful.
to. Thank you.
Okay, Haribo. Anybody else like to say hello?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj, Govinda.
And Vraja, thank you for
class.
Great. I hope we'll see you on that second. We'll have a great time.
Yes.
And even Raghunath may come down to pick me up. So maybe.
Oh, cool.
Wow.
He'll be there, because I'll just stay for a few days, because it's a good time to go up to Super Soul now before things happen. I'll visit up there. And then I'll be in my favorite place, New Jersey, for the rest of the summer.
Awesome.
We can't wait.
Okay. Anybody else say hello?
Well,
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. This is Krishnamrita. Thank you very, very much for this wonderful class. Thank you very much for this wonderful class. This is Krishnamrita.
Yeah. Hi, Krishna. Nice to see you. Thank you. Haribo. Anybody else like to say hello? Great to see you. Amala, Hare Krishna. It's so great from Israel, from Russia. Good. Anybody else?
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. This is Melissa from Bogota.
Melissa, we miss you.
We miss you too. I'm so happy that we can share in the retreat, and I hope to see you soon in the next one here in Colombia.
Okay, just keep the whole thing in your heart and keep those lessons and try to make
Thank
your
you, Maharaj.
deep time, deep space,
I will.
and deep work. Okay, Hare Krishna, good to see
Thank
you.
you. Hare
Okay.
Krishna.
Okay, anybody else like to say hello?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Surya Radhika here.
Wow, you're in the paradise of your place.
The weather is very good, Maharaj.
Wow.
Thank
That's
you
your
very much.
backyard, huh?
Yes, this is our yard.
Front
Yeah.
yard, actually, not backyard. Yeah.
Front yard. Okay, Haribo. Nice to
Thank
see
you very
both of you.
much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else say hello? Okay. Okay, let me just look. I see all the nice people in the class. Okay. Hari, Hari, Hari Bo.